Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to announce and do a short little video on the death of John Amos, the legendary father from the television show Good Times from 1974 to 1976. He was on the show for about, 1973 to 1976, for about 3 seasons. His career, his life starts in 1939. He is John Amos Jr. He was born to Annabelle and John Amos Sr. in East Orange, New Jersey. He attends college and he studies sociology and eventually getting his degree to become a social worker. From there, he goes to the NFL. He was actually drafted in 1964 by the Denver Broncos, but he pulls his hamstring and it forces him to go into the CFL. He plays for several CFL um, teams before switching his ambition in the early 70s to acting. In 1970, in 1970, um, 1974, he gets the acting role on the Mary Tyler Moore show as Gary Howard, um, an electrician at the station. We talked before about the Mary Tyler Moore show with Ed Asner and how big of an impact it was as television was changing in the early 70s. Now, another thing being worked on in the early 70s was the television show Good Times. Now, he first appears on Good Times in 73 on the original version of uh, his original name was Henry on Good Times. There's an episode where Florida, his wife, portrayed by Esther Roll. Of course, we know Good Times is a Norman Lear spinoff of um, of Maud, which is in and of itself a spinoff of All in the Family. Maud is the cousin of Edith Bunker. She comes to town. She has altercations with Archie on All in the Family. They decide to get her own show. She's portrayed by B. Arthur. And Florida, Evans, played by Esther Roll, is her maid. So one day, Henry, Florida's husband, comes home and he says he got a brand new job. He don't want Florida working as a maid in white folks' home no more. But Maud, being the feminist that she is, decides to decides to encourage Florida. No, Florida, you can get your own money. You can do your own thing, right? And then Florida is saying, yeah, she wants to do that. So it ends up into a big argument. That's the first time we see John Amos playing the character of will become James. Now, it's never, and of course, Good Time starts as a spinoff. It's never explained how Florida is the maid to Maud, who lives in upstate New York. How does she travel from Chicago to upstate New York every day uh, to be Maud's maid? I don't know. Maybe there was an episode where she leaves. That had to be the case. You know what I mean? Where uh, she left New York to go to Chicago, and that's where they pick up in Good Times because Good Times takes place in the Cabrini Green projects in Chicago. Um, it doesn't take place in New York. So, but anyway, Florida Esther Roll gets her own show. And one of the things she argued with the producers about, Norman Lear specifically, about, was that she wanted to have a husband on the show. There had been other TV shows particularly Diane Carroll's Julia, that was popular in the '60s, about a single black mother. And we talked about the movie in the '70s that James Earl Jones starred in, Claudine, which also focused on a black single mother. But no, Esther Rolle wanted an intact family unit with a husband. So she said, if I'm not going to get a husband, then I'm not going to do the show. I want a husband. I want to show an intact black family with a mother and a father and kids, just like you would do with a white family. So they do that, and that's when they moved the show to Chicago, and his name's changed. His name changes from uh, Henry to James Evans Sr. Of course, JJ is James Jimmy Walker. Now, the funny thing about it is he is only like 6 or 7 years, like a short distance of time, age-wise, between himself and Jimmy Walker. Like only a 6 years difference between himself and Jimmy Walker. Like, and that was supposed to be his son on TV. Now, according to Ralph Carter, who portrayed the youngest son, Michael Evans, on the show, Esther Rolle and John Amos were hired first, and then he was hired after him. Now, but James Evans on the show was really strict. He was known for getting out the belt when he needed to, but he was also a caring father. One episode that sticks out to me is when Mad Dog, this guy in the neighborhood, wants to get JJ to join a gang. The gang is, of course, a fictionalized version of the Black Gangster Disciples, who were prominent at that time in that housing complex, Cabrini Green. And you can tell by the way they conduct themselves that that's basically what they are. He wants to have JJ join. And JJ does join out of intimidation. But one day, Florida and James are coming home from the movies, and they see JJ about to go vandalize this place. And James Evans says, wait a minute, you're not taking my son nowhere to no gang fight, right? And the Mad Dog said, what are you going to do about it, old man? And he shoots John Amos, right? John Amos survives, but the point is that is driving home is that if JJ didn't have the strong father figure in his home that he had, because Mad Dog is only living with his mom, if JJ didn't have that strong father figure in the home, he probably ended up like Mad Dog, right? In a gang doing, bad stuff. But because he does, he doesn't. Another time, Michael wants to join Black Empowerment Group, posing as a Black Empowerment Group. Of course, this is modeled on the another Chicago gang, the Black Peace Stones, because a lot of their rhetoric is Black positivity and all that sort of jazz, right? Even most of the gangs in Chicago are kind of like that. But when James finds out that he's, his jacket was stolen and he's going up to beat people up, James whoops his ass. See, you ain't joining no gang. So James was a really strong influence on his children. You know what I mean? Influence on Thelma, influence on JJ, and influence on Michael. He was the number one Black dad on television, like the first Black dad ever on television. Before there was Philip Banks, before there was Carl Winslow, before there was Cliff Huxtable, before there was Julius from Everybody Hates Chris. There was James Evans. But then in season 4, because of here's what started to happen. The show was supposed to be initially about a family, right? About the Evans family, growing up, with hard times financially, but good times, basically. They had it hard, but they they struggled financially, but they had a loving family. So everybody was supposed to get equal representation. But the character of JJ started to get more stupider and stupider lines that were about chicken, about Kool-Aid, about stereotypical anti-black comedy. And both Esther Rolle, and he had no job, no prospects, he wasn't in school or anything. He was a complete racialized stereotype, Jimmy Walker's character. He was popular, but he was a racialized stereotype. And this is the 70s, and people are not for that shit. This is not going to be no step and fetch it, Burt Williams type shit that you would have seen in the 30s and 40s in the minstrel shows. No, both Esther Rolle and John Amos are not for that. Now, Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin, the two men in charge of the sitcom, say, well, okay, you don't like it, then you don't have to be on this show. Well, John Amos says, you know what? I'm out of the show. So in season 4, the storyline is James is going to Mississippi to get a job. And he's driving down to Mississippi to get this job and possibly, move the family out of the ghetto into a more country setting in Mississippi. So he goes down there and he gets into a car accident. Now, it's hinted that he was killed by racists, but they never really say it. So, famous episode of Good Times season 4 premiere. It's a two-part episode. They have the funeral, and Florida is not selling it. Florida is not reacting. She's not crying or anything. And she picks up this, I think it's a salad bowl, right? And she's going to serve the guest or give the people back their food, right? And she drops it and she goes, damn, 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 damn. And finally registers with her that her husband of many years is dead. Now, so here's the point. The original thing that Esther Rolle wrote, protested against, that she must have a husband in the home, she no longer has this husband. James Evans is out of the picture. He's passed away. In later seasons, she goes out with this guy, Carl, and stuff, but it's never the same. It's never the way that it was James Evans. And that's like when Good Times jumped the shark. You know what I mean? From that point on. That's not the only thing that that John Amos does. In 1977, based on the book of the landmark book Roots by Alex Haley, ABC decide to come out with a mini-series based on the book, starring anybody who's anybody. Richard Reed was there, the father from the Brady Bunch. LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow was there. Ben Vereen, a bunch of celebrities. Like everybody was anybody was in this. And John Amos was in this as older Kunta Kinte, the main character. The story, for many people that don't know, is about the family life, the family legacy of Alex Haley, the writer. So the guy who helped Malcolm X with his autobiography. He decides to trace his family lineage all the way back to Gambia, West Africa. And it tells the story of each generation. From Kunta Kinte, he goes on a mission to get a drum. And while he's doing this, he's captured by Tubaab, by white men, and enslaved and brought to America. The young Kunta Kinte is portrayed by LeVar Burton, but the older Kunta Kinte, after his foot is amputated for trying to escape, is portrayed by John Amos. And he has a daughter named Kizzy, and they show him living out to his old age, even though his daughter was sold away because her master's niece, portrayed by the father from the Brady Bunch, taught her how to write. And then she used this to create a pass for her boyfriend to escape. And Kizzy was sold away, despite her name being Kizzy, which was a a Mandinkan word. Mandinka was the language that Kunta Kinte spoke, that is spoken in the Senegambia region in Africa, particularly the village where he's from, Jufaray, which became a tourist attraction. Roots was so popular that it became a tourist attraction for African Americans to go to. But despite the fact that her name was Kizzy, which meant stay put, her father didn't want her to be sold away, right? But she was anyway because she broke the rules, and her white friend snitched on her, Missy Ann. So this series was huge. This series sparked a lot of people to want to investigate. It aired in 1977 over the course of like 6 or 7 nights. It sparked a lot of people wanting to investigate their family lineages. And I read it when I was in the 11th grade. I loved it. The book goes much deeper into the origins of the Mende or the Mandinka people, and the origins of Kunta's family, which actually traces its roots all the way back to Mauritania, a Marabout, a Muslim religious figure in Mauritania who migrated down to the Gambia. But the movie doesn't go into that. The movie just starts off in Gambia, and everybody's living in their village. Kunta is a teenager, like I said, portrayed by LeVar Burton. But I liked John Amos's version as the older one because he was the one who led most of the resistance against the white men. There. From there, he has several roles in the 1980s, but perhaps the biggest one, and this hurt my heart because just a few months ago, we said good. In September, as a matter of fact, we said goodbye to James Earl Jones, who was his co-star in this movie, 1988's Coming to America. And both men were the fathers of Sherry Headley, which was Lisa, and Eddie Murphy, which was Hakeem. Well, this was Lisa's father. John Amos portrayed Lisa's father, the owner of McDowell's. Now, the funny thing is, McDowell's is a bootleg McDonald's. But he says, "Oh no, we have gold. They have golden arches. We have golden." I forgot what he said. Golden something. He said, "We don't have golden arches. They have McDonald's, Big Macs. We have big. They're McDonald's. We're McDowell's." So he's Mr. McDowell, and he wants his daughter to get married to Eric LaSalle's character, who owns the Soul Glow company, the hair processing company for the Jerry Curl. And he's all excited. They're in love, kind of, but not really. When she meets Akeem is more humble, Akeem is nicer, and she falls in love with Akeem. But the father doesn't know, John Amos' character doesn't know that Akeem is a prince. When he finds it out, he's like, "Oh my God, Lisa, you have to get with him. He's a prince. He's a prince. He has his own money." Like, he has money with his name on it and stuff when he sees James Earl Jones coming in to the McDowell's establishment and like with money from Zamunda, right? Lisa, you have to get with her. You have to get with Akeem. Akeem, forget the guy, the other guy. Akeem. The other guy even comes to pick her up to apologize to her, and he's holding flowers by the door, and the father just slams the door in the guy's face. You know what I mean? Like, no, forget you. You might be American rich, but this guy's rich. This guy is, he's a prince, But when King Joffrey insults him and says that he's beneath him and his daughter, he says, "I don't care who you are, Jack. This is America. You say one more thing about Lisa, I'll put my foot in your royal ass." So he's a good dad, And eventually, Eddie Murphy and her get married, and they move to Zamunda. And later on in the 2021 version coming to America, we have a video of it on this channel. Find out that they built a McDowell's in Zamunda. So John Amos was also in that as the father. So both the fathers from Coming to America are now no longer with us. Now to discuss the controversy regarding, he was in other movies as well. He was in Ricochet alongside Denzel Washington, The Vantage Point, 1971. Let's Do It Again, alongside Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby, he played Kansas City Mac in that. And that was in 1975. That was um that was where the name Biggie Smalls actually came. He didn't play Biggie Smalls. He played Kansas City Mac, but another character in there was named Biggie Smalls. So it was a blaxploitation film in the 70s. He was in that. He was He actually starred in yet another Norman Lear sitcom in 1994, 704 Hauser Street, in which a black family, the Cumberbatch family, lived in the exact same house that Archie Bunker had lived in during the original show. So he did patch things up with Norman Lear later. He was in My Name is Earl. He was in Murder, She Wrote. He was in Sanford and Son. He was in August Wilson's Gem of the Ocean, Touched by an Angel, Locked Up. He was also in the military, in the New Jersey National Guard. But to talk about his passing, he died of congestive heart failure on August the 21st this year. But his family in Inglewood, California, his family was unaware that he had passed away, specifically his daughter, who just found out on October the 1st. Apparently, the people that were caring for him in a very neglectful way. She didn't even know that her dad had died. So she went for months and months without knowing that her father had passed away. His son was in charge of him. And failed to report it to the media and to the rest of the family. I mean, that's crazy. The fact that his daughter found out so late, I mean, he's been dead for over a month now. Insane. Last year, he was living in Colorado. He was living in Pueblo, Colorado. Last year, Colorado Bureau of Investigation looked into accusations of elder abuse In the same year, he left Colorado and took up residency in Los Angeles. So basically, in a place he was staying in Colorado, in Pueblo, Colorado, they were abusing him. He was like in his 80s. So that's really a shame. You know what I mean? A legend like this, and this is how he goes out. This is how he was treated. You know what I mean? Rest in peace to John Amos. I loved him on Good Times. I think he was the best father ever in the history of television. There have been some great ones. Jason Seaver, portrayed by Alan Thicke. Um, Dan Connor, portrayed by John Goodman. James Avery, playing Uncle Phil. Reginald Bell Johnson playing Carl Winslow. Cliff Huxtable. Bill Cosby playing Cliff Huxtable. But when I think of us, of course, Terry Crews playing Julius on Everybody Hates Chris. Jeff Garland playing Murray Goldberg on the Goldbergs. Red Foreman on that 70s show. Peter Boyle on Everybody Loves Raymond. But the great fathers, all great fathers. But even Fred Gwynn playing Herman Munster on the Munsters. All great fathers. But the best, the black, white, take all of that out of the equation, race out of the equation. The best was James Evans. And I'll tell you why it was him. The circumstances he was dealing with, living in poverty. People will say, well, Julius was living in poverty. Terry Crews' character on Everybody Hates Chris. No, Julius, Chris's family on Everybody Hates Chris, they had their own house. They weren't living in poverty. That was the joke. The teacher, Chris's teacher at Corleone Elementary School, she thought that he was living in poverty. Chris wasn't living in poverty. The other people I mentioned, they weren't living in poverty either, even though the Connors were like semi-poverty, but they weren't living in the projects. They still owned a house, right? Mike Brady wasn't living in poverty. None of these other fathers, Tim Allen, none of them. But James Evans was. James Evans was poverty-stricken. James Evans was always trying to keep his family afloat. And on Christmas episodes, the Evanses had just as much Christmas spirit, at least when Michael wasn't complaining about the white nature of Christmas and the phoniness of Christians, as Christmas is rooted in European traditions. When he wasn't being all militant about it, they celebrated Christmas and they had good Christmases. They had good Thanksgivings. He provided for his family. He was the definition of what a father should be. Yet he was stern. He wasn't allowing them to get away with bullshit. You know what I mean? He wasn't allowing his sons, especially, to fall prey to becoming another black statistic. And he showed that you could be a strong black father on TV. Because like I said, there had never been one. The first black sitcom in history was Julia. And that Diane Carroll had no husband. You know what I'm saying? And he wasn't fat, and he wasn't belligerent, and he wasn't a dumbass. A lot of fathers on TV are such dumbasses. A lot of fathers on TV are outsmarted by the wife. You know what I mean? And it's like with Roseanne, and they say like Dan was a good father and stuff, but a lot of times Dan didn't know what the hell was going on with the kids, right? Same thing with Tim Taylor. Always getting into these accidents, didn't know what was going on, wasn't really hands-on with the kids, but James Evans was. James Evans was the best. When I think of TV fathers, James Evans is the best because of the circumstances he was dealing with. No father before him was dealing with the circumstances like that, and no father after him necessarily was not dealing with the circumstances like that because they stopped featuring black families in abject poverty after the 70s. They wanted to go instead with the Cosby Show model, the middle class model. So Robert from the Parenthood was more middle class. Even George Lopez, the first Latino show, more middle class. They stopped doing it with poor families, poor black families. and now they've stopped featuring fathers altogether. Well, there is no black family sitcom on television right now. I don't think so that I know of. The biggest black sitcom is Abbott Elementary, starring James Tyler Williams and Cheryl Lee Ralph, and that takes place in a school. You know what I mean? So, as far as family, no, doesn't exist anymore. And the last one was My Wife and Kids, starring Damon Wayans. So uh, point being, James Evans and Good Times was a breath of fresh air on television, and the fact that he fought the producers to just make his son intelligent, make JJ mean something. The thing is like this, okay? They do it sometimes with white characters, but they do it a lot with black characters. They think that being funny means that you have to act stupid, you have to act dumb, you have to be unintelligent, right? You have to be a dumbass. There are dumb white characters on television. Phoebe from Friends, Joey Tribbiani from Friends, right? Buddy Limbeck from Charles in Charge, uh, Kimberly from Kimmy Gibbler from Full House, right? Uh, but they're not as dumb as they tried to make JJ, and that's what John Amos was protesting against in Esther Rolle. Esther Rolle got fed up. She almost left the show too. There are several episodes, like towards the end, like they're raising, like when Thelma moves in uh, with her husband right before they win the lottery, they're raising themselves. Esther Rolle's off the show too because she got tired of it. She got tired of the bullshit, the buffoonery with JJ. Like, how many times during an episode do you have to say dynamite? You know, I mean, the Fonz had a, but he didn't say it every 5 minutes, you know, and he had nothing going for himself at all as a character. He was completely dumbed down. In a similar way, I feel like they did it with Uza Aduba in Orange is the New Black. Like, okay, yeah, she's there for comic relief, but how far do you want to go? Like, she's a complete moron. Now, people can say, oh, they do it on white shows too. Like I said, the example, Eric Matthews, Kimmy Gibbler, Homer Simpson, they do that, yeah. But they're not as stupid as they try to make the black characters be, and useless. And that's what John Amos was against, and that's why he left the show. He said he said it on Vlad. He said it was an unrealistic portrayal of a black family written by white writers. And let's be real, just like he ripped off the British show Till Death Do Us Part, and he ripped off another British show to inspire him for Sanford and Son, Norman Lear ripped off Eric Monte's script for Eric Monte wrote Cooley High, and he basically ripped that off to create Good Times. I mean, that's the truth. Like, Good Times wasn't an original idea created by Norman Lear. And all the Kool-Aid jokes, all the fried chicken jokes, all the jokes about the ghetto, it got to be too much for John Amos. So I don't blame him for leaving the show. It was a brilliant show. It was a revolutionary show, but I don't blame him for leaving the show. He wanted to be taken seriously. Here's a man who was in the army. Here's a man who was a football player, traveled all around the world in the National Guard. He had respect. He had self-respect. And just like James Earl Jones, he didn't take roles or didn't want to take roles or be associated with roles that would belittle him as a person. Love you guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Kudos to John Amos for taking that stand against Norman Lear. When Norman Lear died, I said Norman Lear is your textbook example, in my opinion, of a liberal kind of bigoted. Like, he was against bigotry, but some of his father's bigotry, which inspired the character of Archie Bunker, rubbed off on him because of the way he wrote the black characters in Good Times. Black characters were written as caricatures in Good Times, especially JJ. And John Amos was against that, and he left the show because of that. Kudos to him for standing up for principles and being more than just about money. Love you guys.